Alright, in this video we're going to see how we can make Blender interface and our general workflow faster and better suited to our needs. We're going over the interface, some render settings, and some very useful add-ons that are already included in Blender but are disabled by default. Okay, so this is the default Blender scene. This is what you're going to see whenever you open up Blender and you haven't changed anything. We have a light, the default cube, a camera, our timeline down here, and all the settings that are here. Okay, so first thing that most of us are going to do is just deleting this default cube or just pressing A and deleting everything. And we have to do this every single time that we open Blender. Now we're going to learn how we can change that so we don't have to delete this poor cube every single time. And we're going to start that by deleting this cube, but just this once. Okay, so I'm going to select the cube and press delete on my keyboard. Now I don't really need a point light. Most of the lights I use are area lights, spotlights, sunlights, HDRIs. I rarely use a point light, so I'm going to delete that as well. But I'm going to keep the camera and I'm going to get rid of this timeline down here because, well, the first thing that I want to do is model something or make my scene. I don't need this timeline right now. So I'm going to right click and click join area and get rid of that so I get more real estate for my modeling. Whenever I want the timeline, I can bring my mouse down here to the corner and drag up. And I get a new window and I can set this to timeline. And I get the timeline back. But I don't want it right now and I'm going to get rid of that. Next thing that we're going to see is our render settings. So by default it's set to Eevee and I use cycles most of the time and I don't want this to be CPU. I don't want the render to use CPU. I want GPU compute. Right now it's grayed out because my GPU is not selected by default, and we'll fix that in a second after we go over all this. Now, these samplings for viewport and render are way too high. 1024 for viewport and 4096 for render. So I'm going to decrease this. I want to set that to 100 and this to maybe 300. And this is more than enough for most cases, but if you need more light in your scene or it's getting too noisy, you can just come and increase this. And I'm going to decrease this noise threshold also. If your scene is getting too noisy, you can come here and change these values, but keep in mind that it will come in the expense of your render time. Okay, now next we're going to light path, and these values are again set too high for default, and I'm going to increase these and something like that. And let's go to our output. So 1920 by 1080 by default is fine. 24 frames is fine. You can change your default output folder here. If you have a specific folder in your hard drive that you want your renders to go there, you put this here. And the file format, default format that the renders are going to be, you can change this to any of the things, and PNG, JPEG, even by default, if you're rendering animation, you can change it to AVI or these formats. And you can change all this to your liking. I'm not going to touch that right now. And let's go and fix this one. So I'm going to edit, preferences, and in my system, right now the cycles render device is set to none. So this is disabled. I have an NVIDIA GPU, so I'm going to set this to optics. And right now it gets enabled. It's not grayed out anymore. And I don't want to check this one. I just want the GPU to do the rendering. I don't want my CPU. Okay. Now let's go. Let me show you something about the interface, this resolution scale. So you can change this to increase the size of basically everything in Blender. So if you have a large monitor and you want to see things better, or you have trouble seeing these, or you just prefer the interface bigger, you can change it here. Or maybe you can go the other way, and if you want things to be smaller, you can go the other way. I'm going to set it to 1. I'm not gonna touch that. And let's go to navigation. So there are 2 things that we have to change here. First, this one, orbit around selection. Right now, whenever I orbit, okay, let me add cube here just to show you. Right now, whenever I orbit around, I'm orbiting around the center, okay, no matter what I have selected. But if I check that, now I'm orbiting around whatever I've selected. So if I select the camera, I'm orbiting around that. And if I select this, I'm orbiting around this. So this would be very useful when you're modeling, especially in complex scenes. And the second one is auto depth. Okay, so it helps when you're zooming in and out with your scroll wheel. And that's it for this one. Now let's go to add-ons. There are many add-ons that come in Blender by default, and they have not been enabled. So let's go over some of those. First thing that I'm going to enable is Node Wrangler add-on. Well, it's a very useful add-on, especially when you're doing dealing with nodes and you're shading objects. And if you don't know how to use it or what it does, leave a comment down there, and I might add a separate video for this one. Next thing that we're going to do is images as planes. Import images as planes. So this add-on, when I enable this, it adds to my add menu. If I go here into image, I get this option, images as planes. And when I click that, I can just select an image from my HUD and it will just import it as a plane. By default, it usually adds the image to your scene as an empty, but this one adds it as a plane, which is very more useful. Okay. Now, if you do a lot of environment work, or you want to add landscapes, you can enable this one, ANT landscape. And again, it's a fairly complex add-on. I'm not gonna go deep into that, but it's a very useful one. And let's go with pie menus, this one. Okay, so if this is disabled, let me add again a cube so I can show you. Right now, if I want to delete, for example, this vertex and I press X, I get this menu right here. Now, if I enable this, that changes to this pie menu, which is more visually interesting and maybe faster to deal with. So you have all the delete options up here and the dissolve options down here, and some other options like merge by distance in the side. So whenever you want to delete, for example, a vertex, you can just select that. And this motion, let me undo that, doing this X and this is much faster than selecting from a list. But keep in mind that you might not need all these. So I'm going to disable this for Control S. I want right now, if I press Control S, I'm going to get a pie menu for new, save, open. I don't want all that. So I want my Control S, where is it? My Control S to just be save. I want to just press Ctrl S and save my file as fast as I can. So I'm going to disable that, and this one, the A key, so A is for selecting everything, and right now if I press A, I again get a pie menu, and I don't need this, so I'm going to disable that as well. So whenever I press A, everything in my scene gets selected. Okay, and last but not least, loop tools. So this one again is a very useful add-on, and I'm going to show you what it does in case you don't know. So I'm going to add a circle here, and here go to my edit, and I have this edit button here, so loop tools. I'm going to press Shift D and duplicate this right here, and I'm going to select everything and select bridge. Okay, so it does that just with one click and very easily. It's there. So let me show you another example. I'm going to add a plane, go to tab, and you also have the loop tools right here whenever you enable it. So I'm going to subdivide it a bunch of times, and I'm going to select this square and press circle, and it tries to make it closer to a circle. So I didn't have so many vertices here, so it only had like 8. This is the closest thing that it could get me, but if I had more geometry and more vertices here, the result would be closer. It's a very useful add-on. I'm not gonna dive deep into everything it does. I'm gonna leave it for a separate video, but you can just use it and play with it and see how useful it is. Okay, so now that we have done all this, you go to File, Defaults, and Save Startup File. So we have made all the changes that we want to the interface, to our settings, render settings, and everything. And I'm going to save this file as the startup file. So whenever I open up Blender, this is what I'm going to see. So no default cubes, no lights, nothing. Just a very clean interface that I can just start modeling and do whatever I want. So I'm going to File, Defaults, and Save Startup File, and the confirmation, startup file saved. So now when I go to, for example, if I have this, and now if I go to New and select General, this is my startup file. Okay, so this is way faster and way easier, and you don't have to delete that poor cube every single time you open up Blender. Okay, so this is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. If you have any questions or any suggestions for future videos, please leave a comment down below, and you can check these videos out if you want to see how you can get the most out of your lights in Blender and adding image textures to your lights. I'll see you in the next one.